Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Nate Bauer here with me. We're a man down today. Sean Fitz not able to be with us. Some personal stuff going on for him, so we're going to carry on and give you a good show today. But we're thinking about Fitz today and also Nate's phone. So we have some technical difficulties. Like, you know, it's a preseason for everybody. So, Nate, I actually like the shot. But welcome to the show. I don't feel like I didn't set you up for success at all with that intro. But what are you thinking about this week? What's going on with you? How was your weekend? Tell us about Nate Bauer and what's going on in your brain.
Well, I mean, I think we need to start with addressing the elephant in the room, which is the altered camera angle, which is the result of me using an iPhone 12 mini that the main camera is broken and obviously broken. And anybody who's been watching the show, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen any complaints from the comment section, which suggests to me that nobody has noticed that the camera has been struggling to focus, which is good. I don't want people to be looking at me anyway, right? A face for radio, as they say. But yeah, no, good weekend. I got a little bit of time away last week. So our last show last Tuesday was the last day before we headed out of town for a little bit. But yeah, we're back. Practice tonight, practice Tuesday evening. We should get a last look at, and look, I'm projecting here a little bit, but the way things typically go for Penn State, and how they treat the preseason heading into these first games of the season, my anticipation is that they will they will have the meetings for naming starters and scout teams and break off into those groups tonight, meaning the way that this is timed is that the media has a last opportunity to speak to James Franklin, speak to Andy Kotelnicki. Tom Allen will be available tonight, a couple of players tonight, all of which leads into any questions about, hey, who won the third running back job? Will be, well, we haven't had those conversations yet. We're going to have them tonight. So until those happen, it will leave a gap from tonight until next Monday, when James Franklin will have his first normally scheduled weekly press conference. For him to address those battles.
Are we still not doing the depth chart thing this year? Is that another consistent thing? I forget at all.
Blue White Illustrated is doing a depth chart. We will have a depth chart, and would anticipate that to be pretty good. It's usually fairly reflective of where things are for this team. So I don't know if that's how Penn State will handle that, but certainly I do anticipate that they will transition more meaningfully than those conversations about starters and not starters, is the fact that they will start actual game week prep. I believe, again, can't be sure until Franklin says it tonight, but they will begin game week prep starting tomorrow. So yeah, gives them like a little bit of a week and a half lead up into that first game.
We're going to dive a little bit more into what we're expecting tonight later in the show. Of course, a couple other things to talk about. We're going to have the BWI Mailbag at the end of the show, and yesterday was my anniversary, so I did not get the mailbag up until later. Forgot about that. Sorry, everybody. So if you didn't get a question in, you didn't see it Monday night on the message board, you're more than welcome to throw it in here into the chat or place it in here gently. I don't want to make it sound like you're just dumping it in. But anyway, put your thoughts in the chat. We'll get to those to have all those at the end of the show in the BWI Mailbag. I'm sorry, I was distracted because I was going to get to some things in the chat. The chat's hot so far to start the show, and David Greeter said, bold take, T. Frank. Penn State drops 40 plus week 1 against West Virginia. When I was reading that and talking at the same time, Nate, I thought he was saying I said that. I'm like, I didn't remember saying that. But Dave, this is David's general tone in the chat. 2024 Big Ten champions, baby. Let's go. With 3 exclamation points and all
bold.
Caps. So
that is bold.
Yes, he is fired up and ready for the season. Some things that we're going to get to today. Let's talk about this just quickly. Penn State named their team captains. I'm going to give you that information here to start the show because that's one of the major things we're talking about today. Here are the captains: Drew Aller, Nick Dawkins, Kobe King, KJ Winston, Riley Thompson, and Dom DeLuca. There are 6 captains, and they're listed by offense, defense, and then special teams. DeLuca is the only returning captain. If you're playing at home, that is 2 defensive players that are captains, but DeLuca wears 0. He is the special teams captain for that phase of the football, even though he is a regular contributor on special teams. Anything that stands out to you initially, Nate? So your high-level thoughts on the team captains that were announced earlier this week.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of ways to look at this. Certainly the one that stands out to me the most is Drew Aller. You as a program, you want that. You kind of have to have that. I just don't think there's a world where it's okay to not have him fill that role. Right? You need that from your starting quarterback, and I think it's been a process of drawing that out of him. I'm not sure that comes naturally or as naturally to him as it does to someone like KJ Winston, who, I wrote a story. We had a big feature over the weekend. If you haven't checked that out, please go do it. Right. Because KJ Winston is a butt kicker, right? Like he's, and it's not a rah-rah kind of thing. It's I will destroy you. if you don't have it together, right? You're letting everybody down. And it's such an interesting dynamic, where honestly, I would call him one of the strongest leaders of the team, Winston, because he is that enforcer kind of guy, but because he lives it himself, everyone likes him. There's no resentment over the fact that that's the style of leadership that he brings to the field. So
he talked about it during Lift for Life, the pre-Lift for Life conversations. He said, like, you want to build relationships with guys, and that's what he was trying to do over the last couple of years, build relationships with guys. So as he said, when you go after them, they know it's out of a place of love, or that person, so you build that trust so you can demand something of them. So, I mean, some people just get it, right, Nate? Like, some people just get those subtle things about interpersonal relationships that elude the rest of us at times.
Yeah, it's a rare club for a reason, and it's an even rarer club. This is the thing that James Franklin's been talking about, and I know that we've touched on it here, but I think it's worth reiterating. It's a cultural change broadly as much as it is anything else, which is to say, today's college student athletes, guys who are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, they worry about handling their own business more than, and some do it exceptionally well.
Yeah.
But they have trouble putting themselves in a position to worry about everybody else's. And it's a tough dynamic. It's a tough balance to have where you are willing and able and enthusiastic about calling things out, about lifting the standard, about setting the example for everybody else about how to conduct your business. I mean, this is, it's college football, and it's easy for us to talk about, but like this is life and death stuff for these guys.
So, but this is the psychology I want to get into here, and I'm not asking you to be a psychologist, but like, I don't do that, right? So like, just a personal, I relate to the world through my own experiences. I'm not a person who is a demanding leader in any sort of like facet of my life necessarily. I feel like that's a personality trait for a lot of people, but if you're saying it's a generational thing, is social media part of that, where you feel like any moment you make a mistake, it's going to then be broadcast to the world if there are people who have an axe to grind because you expected something of them and you didn't live up to that standard perfectly? Is it a trust thing? Like, I guess, what do you think? Like, what's the dynamic at play there where it seems to be something that was more prevalent in the past, or at least that's the way it's framed by the people kind of leading this conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am getting further away from being a kid, even though in my head I still am one. And
Isn't that the worst? I'm the same way.
I'm 40 years old. I can't. Can I relate to today's college student? Yeah, in some respects, there are some commonalities there, but the environment that they grew up with versus me, and their involvement in sports and how sports work at the youth level, and what their comfort level is interpersonally, being able to have those leadership skills developed. No, I don't know that. Like I don't know what has gone into that hesitation, but I do think that it's something that certainly the consistency with which James Franklin has brought it up suggests to me, and again, psychology degree from James Franklin, right? He has insight into these things. He sees
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
I think that when he speaks about that type of thing, I listen because he's got 20 years as a coach under his
Yeah.
belt, 20
Yeah.
years plus, right? And he has that psychology background. He understands how the evolution has gone in that department and how hard it is to get that out of kids at this point. It's not a I want to make sure that we're not framing it the wrong way as though it's a selfishness thing. I don't think
Yeah.
that it is. I just think that it's a hesitancy
Yeah.
to put yourself in a position uh, to hold others to account, especially when you're younger,
Hmm.
right? Like there's the whole dynamic of seniors and juniors and seniority in college football. I mean, all of those frat like dynamics are in play, right? And military, right? You name it, like
Right.
any of those types of organizations, those things are in play in college football. It's just a matter of how you handle them, and I think it's tougher for some guys than it is for others.
If you want to build bonds and build leadership qualities, something you could do if everyone is into that thing is take them out for a beer. And if you're going to do that, Anti-Fragile Brewing Company, I would say, is the place that you should go. Appreciate them being a sponsor here on the BWI Live Show. 324 East Calder Way in State College. Google it. You own a phone. You can Google where Anti-Fragile is, but it's on Calder Way, over by where I don't know if it's Babies anymore, but just down the road from where Babies was. Anyway, I got a chance. You're seeing it here. I got a chance to do a tour of Anti-Fragile, and I was blown away by all the things that they're able to do on such a small footprint. They have their Moody Culture Kombucha, and they have the Anti-Fragile Brewery, and all of it, Nate, takes place on site. They mill their own wheat and brew their own beer, and they have a bunch of different varieties and all kinds of cool stuff at that place, and it's all fresh, locally sourced ingredients. They collaborate with other local vendors so that the coffee, the spirits that you're seeing made here, they're all locally sourced. So if you want to have this is an espresso martini they made me, by the way, one of those with some Rothrock coffee, check out Anti-Fragile Brewing Company. I had a great time being there, checking everything out that they had. And also, if you're going to the games this fall, they're going to have 2 beers on tap at Beaver Stadium. So make sure you check those out. I think it's the game day that you saw there on screen. And if you're watching on, or you're listening on our podcast feed, then you didn't see it, but I just imagine it. It's got green and white, and it looks like a field and game day. You get what we're talking about. And if you're out there and you're having a beer and you're bringing your friends over, try out Uncle John's John. They have fresh cheesesteaks made to order. Again, local stuff, Gemelli Bakery, top-notch ingredients, all this stuff that's going to be delicious, and you're going to feel good about eating because it's all part of the State College community. Appreciate them being a part of us, and we want to be a part of the community as well. So we're super excited for this collaboration between us and between Anti-Fragile, who is a top 10 PA brewery on Untapped ranking. So check them out. If you're planning your visit to State College for the first month of the season, put Anti-Fragile on your list. It's well worth it. Nate, any final thoughts on this conversation about the leadership and the team captains and all that stuff? We're going to get to it later in the mailbag, but I just wanted to kind of wrap that up if you had anything else you wanted to discuss or any other interesting points.
I'm so stuck on the beer and cheesesteaks right now that I One thing, it's always exciting to me when our sponsors are places that we go.
Yeah.
Right. Like that you like them anyway. It's harder to make a pitch for a company that you don't support or don't believe in or don't visit regularly. And I can attest, I do all three at Anti-Fragile on the weekend. So great place, and it's awesome to have them as a sponsor.
So the next thing we're going to get into today is some of the news and notes from Penn State football over the last couple of days. I think this came out on Sunday, but Penn State player is going to make a position switch for the upcoming season. So Nate, tell us about the latest Nittany Lion who's moving spots right before the Penn State season.
Yeah, I think so. It's Dakari Nelson, right? Sean reported it on Sunday morning, I believe, ish. Safety who had been part of that. Look, you've got this situation at safety where Penn State has three guys that they know about and feel extremely confident in, and top to bottom, right? There is no shortage of confidence in Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, and Zach Key Wheatley. After that, following the departure of King Mack in the spring, it gets a little dicier. There's a little less, assuredness, I would say, and that's not a behind the scenes thing. That's a readily acknowledged. I think Anthony Poindexter said, "Yeah, we got some work to do." Right at the beginning of preseason practice, so they've been sorting that out. There have been some positive vibes for some of the players in that group. It's just a matter of figuring out who the fourth and fifth are, I would say. Is Dakari Nelson realistically one of them? No, I don't think so. Not at this point for him. And so you've got a need in terms of depth. We've talked about it already. You've got a need for depth at linebacker. There are reps available there at linebacker. And so you've got, to me, it seems like a confluence of a bunch of different storylines all at once, where for his personal trajectory, and I was actually hoping that you could help on this, is how similar or how many traits he shares with Tyrese Mills, because you've seen safeties float through that cycle, right? You've seen the program has seen the corner to safety transition and the safety to linebacker transition over the last couple of years.
So the name that came to mind initially was Koa Farmer, not Tyrese Mills, just because of his frame. Because I think this will give him the opportunity. He's floated anywhere between like 217 and 225 pounds, I think, over the last year or so. And so the growth potential, we've always talked about him as a guy who could potentially play linebacker. So to me, that means box linebacker. When we have the conversation that he's moving to linebacker, I don't count where Tyrese Mills is playing necessarily as a linebacker. That's more of a slot position. So I could be wrong there, because, we can phrase the nickel lion position as anything we want. It's a catch-all, and I'm sure at some point we'll have the conversation of, well, the lion is blankety blank. But in Tom Allen's defense, it is slot corners and safeties. So if he is not a safety, therefore he is a box linebacker. And that's where the Koa Farmer conversation came up to me. And I full transparency, I was very high on Dakari Nelson and his potential, because I thought he had the opportunity, if his growth and development happened the right way, that he could maintain speed, get bigger, and be a 220-pound safety that could be kind of a eraser of tight ends and players in the run game, because he was fast on film, and he's big, and he had like a really good... He was a corner in high school for his team that he was obviously not going to play corner at the next level, but he had good man coverage skills, I thought, for a guy who was pretty raw. Now he's going to be playing in the box. And I never thought he was the most physical player on film because of all of the background information. So I'm just generally concerned about where this is going for Dakari. He can still blossom into a linebacker and be a really good defender, but he's going to have to learn a whole new skill set. of block destruction in the box, taking on guards. He's got to get bigger now. So if he is indeed a box linebacker, I think that this is it's a long-term development, and I think that also puts him in a position where it's not 2024 where he's contributing. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see that myself, and it should be something that we get an opportunity to check out at practice tonight.
Camp A. Campbell has a question here in the chat. He donated to the channel. Always appreciate super chats, and it's the one instance where we've got a couple things that I was going to say for the mailbag, but want to make sure if A. Campbell here has to get going, they get their question answered. What position do you see as potentially being significantly better or worse than 2023? If none, which do you see as potentially better than expectation? Great job with the live shows. Always appreciate that when people donate and are nice to us, Nate. Do you need me to vamp a little bit longer for you to get an answer to this? Because I read the question, but I didn't necessarily process it. There's a multi-step question. So what do you think?
Yeah, so I have a thought, and I'd be interested. I want your feedback on this, T. Frank, but I think that the defensive tackles have a chance to be very strong beyond what they were last year. I think that, and this is straightforward and maybe stupid, I think having 23 and 24-year-old dudes at the defensive tackle spots makes a difference. I think having that it can be a real strength. I think that Zane Durant is very good anyway and will blossom even more this season. I think that Devon J. Thomas, now formerly Ellie's, played really well in the bowl game and has
he played well all year. He was a bright spot for that defensive line for sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I got excited when you said that.
No, I guess when you add Keziah Izzard, who should be healthy and available all season this year, and Hakeem Beamon, who I think has been sort of an under the radar kind of guy his whole career, that to have two waves of those types of guys, plus Alonzo Ford, who is an older guy himself. Even after missing a year last year, I think that there's an opportunity for that position group to be stronger in performance than it necessarily was last year, even though I thought last year they were better than maybe they were given credit for.
So I would say that the two guys that have the most room for growth are, in terms of production, Keziah Izzard, who was not there for the first couple weeks of the season, and then Durant, and you outlined that. With Izzard, he's got the size and movement skills. He's been a guy since his senior year at DeMatha that I've seen as a guy who could be a complete 3 technique and has NFL potential based on his, he's 3'10" and he moves really well. There's a couple of factors here that I find interesting. I actually wrote about this at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com yesterday, so if you want to go check that out, you can subscribe right now for $1, and you get that for 2 months, so you're well into the season. Use promo code PSU1. Sorry, A. Campbell, had to pull down your comment there so everyone could see the promo code. PSU1. You get 2 months for $1, and you can get in this inside access, all of our premium content, including our premium podcast to be named later, which we are currently voting on the name over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So if you want to get in on all of that, do that right now, and you'll get access to all of that, and you can get your opinion heard. My biggest concern, there's 2 of them. One, what is Tom Allen going to do with those players? There's still, I think, a gap in my understanding of what he did at Indiana, what he can do at Penn State with that talent, and what did he want to do but he couldn't because he didn't have that talent, especially defensive tackle. Secondly, just because you're older doesn't mean you're more mature. This group, over the course of their time at Penn State, has shown some maturity issues. So, have they grown up? You mentioned Hakeem Beamon as a guy who's been kind of under the radar. He's supremely talented, but consistency has been a huge issue for him. Keziah Izzard, kind of the same way. So you're right. Physical development absolutely matters. But in terms of guys who turn the light on, Devon J. Thomas is kind of, I don't want to say maxed out, but we saw his development. So I expect more of what he did last year. And then some of the technique stuff he can get better at. But generally, as a physical prospect, I see him as a complete a complete player. So then what are you getting from those guys from a mental development and a technical development? That's the biggest question. And so I see it as some room for improvement, but not a massive leap forward. I guess the position I would go to is I think the receiver room and generally the skill positions can have more efficiency this year. Something else we're going to get to in the mailbag, but I would say bare bones, the receivers will be better because the offensive scheme will do more for them. That would be kind of the way that I view that.
I'll add one more, but I don't think that the expectations are anything but astronomical anyway. Right. So we're answering different questions, T. Frank, because you're saying where the room for growth is. If the room for growth question is to be answered, to me, it's the running back spot. Right. Like, I think Nick Singleton is going to be awesome this year. I think that Katron Allen is going to be awesome this year. I think that those guys in Andy Kotelnicki's system, using them the way that we anticipate he will use them, they have an opportunity to be very, very good. That said, I think everyone anticipates that.
Right.
Like it's not a unique thing to us to expect those guys to shine. But I do think that they will very much live up to what the expectations were really going into last year for both of those guys.
And I guess that's when I see potentially being significantly better. That's what I think of room to grow and also people's expectations of the situation. Worse, that's a tough one. On the other side, and we'll move on. But I don't have one that jumps to mind as being worse. Maybe the offensive line, just because of all the turnover. But generally, I think the theme this offseason has been hope that group, with the depth that they have of wanting to play 8 players, has a certain feel about it that it's not as bad as it seems.
Can you correct me on this, T. Frank?
Maybe.
But I think that the perspective on the offensive line is that at worst it will be a push. And the reason it should be a push between last year and this year is that while the pass blocking will be likely worse this year, they anticipate that the run blocking as the group
and they'll have to do it
going to be better.
Yeah. I don't know that it will be better. So this gets into like the deep stuff in the scheme and kind of getting into Andy Kotelnicki's effect on all of it. So generally, high level thing, block angles should be easier for the offensive line. Talk to Javen Williams. Some of the things they're doing will make the offensive line play faster. Are the players blocking themselves better at run blocking than their predecessors? I don't think so. Caden Wallace turned into a really strong run blocker by the end of his career. Sal Wormley, Caden Wallace was a strong combo up front. The problem was they had so much responsibility to be great on every single play that it seemed like things were not. They could block really well, and there were still 9 players in the box within a second of the snap because you had 8 there, and then a 9th drops anyway. So the congestion was bad. This year, I think you could see significantly more mistakes and mental busts and failed blocks. But as you mentioned, there's just more room to run. And there's going to be the Andy Kotelnicki of it all is going to give them the opportunity to succeed. Now, the problem is you have to actually block people. You have to, he can't magically make it so that, oh, you know what, it's all right. Our left guard can just take this play off. So, there's fundamentals that don't change, but you can try and put those players in better situations. So that's the whole offense is better situations is what he presents. And we'll see kind of if that actually happens because of those underlying principles that, we just kind of skated loosely and quickly skated over the top. It is preseason award season, which means people are getting awards for something they haven't done yet. So let's talk about the preseason awards. A lot of them have been going out. Abdul Carter, Cooper Cousins are the guys that are primarily in the focus here, Nate. So I don't know if you've read any of these, or I was just taking some of the headlines because Greg does a great job of collecting all of here's what people are saying. So again, go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for a rundown of all that stuff. But what did you learn from all of that?
Nothing. No, there's nothing to learn.
Did you find any of it interesting?
No.
Didn't learn anything. Wasn't interesting. I
Yeah.
agree, but our salesmanship on this segment is excellent.
Yeah, I think that sometimes there are nuggets of motivation to be found in some of these conversations. I distinctly recall Jalen Sider being annoyed. I don't even know what he was responding to. They right, Nick and Katron were not uh, listed among the top 10 returning running back duos in June, maybe. And he was ticked about he was ticked about it. It was like, how, whatever. It doesn't matter. But point
Yeah.
being is sometimes the preseason they're not being awarded anything. They're being included in a group of potential award winners. And then as we all know, occasionally a season has guys emerge that weren't anticipated at the beginning of the season and they end up
Yeah.
winning the award anyway. So yeah, Abdul Carter as a second team All American is, yeah, I think he's the most dynamic player on Penn State's defense, maybe the most dynamic player on the team. His usage as a defensive end is maybe makes that less known as a quantity, right? Like, I don't know how he's going to be as a defensive end. Everything I've heard and everything I anticipate is that he's going to
Yeah.
be great, but you
Yeah.
got to see it. You got to see that actually happen. So
Yep.
no, it's pretty
Yeah.
much standard. Cooper Cousins was the best player in the class last year for Penn State and has delivered on that and more in
Yeah.
every sense. So to include him on a freshman All American team, yes, it's something, but also importantly, a position group that is hard to find candidates within.
Yeah, at offensive line. That's a very good point. So just to run down these honors or recognitions, Abdul Carter, as you mentioned, AP second team All American preseason. He's a top 25 most influential player according to ESPN, I believe it was. He came in the 20s. Cooper Cousins on 3 freshman All American team. How many of those offensive linemen do you see playing enough to be on the team? That's a great point. And then newcomers who will shape the Big Ten race and title, meaning players that are on a new team, transfers or freshmen. Penn State had 3 on this list. Julian Fleming at 8. AJ Harris, Jalen Kimber both tied at 9. Anything else that you want to talk about with that group before we get on to our practice preview in the mailbag?
Yeah, I would put AJ Harris higher
Yeah,
of those 3 guys. He has decidedly the most buzz of anyone. So we'll see.
Yeah. We normally use this intro because we're coming out of practice and talking about what we see, but what the hell? Let's do it now. So like we said, we're going to get the update tomorrow on the BWI Live Show with me and Greg, but we're going to preview the things we're interested in seeing, hearing, or learning at practice tonight. As always, I'm going to hit this again. Subscribe right now to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Join us right now for the season. 2 months for $1. It matters tonight because we're going to have practice updates. We're going to have a thread for it. Nate has his James Franklin immediate takeaway thread where he gives you all the updates. I get you that stuff here on the YouTube channel. You get the full comments a little bit later, but if you are somebody who needs it now as it's happening, Nate does a great job of transcribing on the fly. Code PSU1, 2 months for $1. That's just a small sample size, including our practice notes, notebooks, and observations, which are premium content at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So preview it, Nate. What's interesting to you when we go to practice tonight?
Sign up if you haven't already so that you can check out our thoughts. Yeah, what am I looking for tonight? Health. Always health. Always. Right? That is the primary takeaway from, especially at this point in camp. You have guys coming back and you have guys leaving, right? Who may have gotten some bumps and bruises here and there. Obviously, last week came the news of Peter Gonzalez being lost for a significant amount of time. He's likely out for the season. And that's not nothing, right?
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Any losses, any losses in the receiver room, even if he had not drawn necessarily the same buzz as Tysier Denmark.
Hmm.
He was still a guy who was poised to potentially contribute, even if it's in 4 games.
Yep.
So that is something. Certainly, I think we're going to be watching the offensive line to see how they look, right? Who's there, who
Yep.
might not be, and get a little bit better of an idea as they go into, again, this transition from camp proper to game week planning extended. Is going to be something that we're definitely keeping an eye on.
I'm always interested in what are they working on. It means nothing, but I just find it to interesting in my own little slice of the world. What concepts are they working on? Who's playing where? And I'm always with the offense. That's just generally how it's worked out over the last 2 years of doing this. I don't really care how the quarterbacks look, but I'd like to see them throw the football more than 4 yards to another player wearing a jersey and not, doing RPO reads and stuff like that. I don't know that we're going to get that. I kind of doubt it based on the way things have gone all the way back to spring football, but those are some things I just find interesting, and those are what I latch on to, so I'm always keeping an eye out for that. But as you mentioned earlier, I just want to hit this again. This is a time where you might see the team splitting between the 2 deep and the D squad. You're saying that's not going to happen today. The first chance we'll get to see that is Wednesday next week when they have open practice.
That is what I would anticipate. I'm speaking from prior experience.
Yes.
This is typically how Penn State has handled these things. Tom Allen talked about it on the Big Ten Network 2 weeks ago about how they, intended to have a longer game week prep. So this is typically the timeline of how that works. So I would, look, you get a pretty good idea. They don't usually practice during the segments that we watch. They typically don't do groupings.
Yeah.
Right. You're typically looking at fumble drills and ball security and all of those kinds of things in straight lines. But the lines give you an idea of where guys stand, right? You don't have the walk-ons in the front. It's the starters. So you can get a general sense of where guys are in the pecking order, but I do think that the 2 deep stuff is something that will be more understood later this week.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I'm curious about, and I don't want to overstate it, but I also just find it to be, it's something we've been tracking for a while now. Where in the world is Cooper Cousins? Is he with the centers? Is he with the guards? The way that things have changed with Penn State's offensive line, probably the most dramatic group that can get work individually instead of offensive line. Now they kind of do things a little bit differently. So what group is he with? Because James Franklin said he's been working with the centers and with the guards. How much has he been working with the centers? I have not seen it. But again, we get 10 minutes of individual drills. We don't get to see they're going through the practicing plays and he's switching between guard and center and both sides of the football. We haven't seen any of that. So I just find where Cooper is interesting. And then, of course, after practice, we get to talk to some individuals that I find interesting. Whenever Andy Kotelnicki is speaking, I want to be there. But of course, he and Tom Allen are speaking, so I'm gonna have to make some tough choices of what videos I'm gonna bring to you at bluewoodillustrated.com and here on the YouTube channel. Any other final thoughts about tonight?
You take Andy, I'll take Tom. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
I'll bother him with some more questions about scheme that he won't want to answer, which is always what I end up doing. Let's get to the BWI mailbag. We got some great questions today, and I want to leave enough time that we can give the good conversation about these. So let's dive into your thoughts on the mailbag. So I have no idea. Just to start off here, this is always my favorite thing to do, and it's super professional, but I have some limited controls here on this side, and I've been getting some massive static interference. So if our audio quality is garbage, leave me a note in the chat. Hopefully it isn't, and hopefully it's just literally in my ears. But I rely on you guys to let me know that stuff, because this is pretty much everyone uses what we're using, but there are some limitations to it. And I always want to make sure that we're giving you the best possible broadcast we can. Here's the first question, David. HOHMADW 1978 asks, he asked this question on last year's show. What defensive player for the 2024 season will have the most impact? Who do you think?
Abdul Carter.
Okay.
But
tell me why.
I just think that position lends itself to drama, positively and negatively, but in his case, positively for Penn State. Yes, you got to stop the run. I anticipate that Tom Allen coached defense will do that. I think they will be fundamentally sound. I think that, excuse me, you have linebackers in Kobe King and Tony Rojas to do that. I think the defensive tackles can do that. I think that the run stopping piece of the equation is probably there. Who is going to sack the quarterback, and who is going to strip the ball and create game-changing turnovers? Who is going to provide enough pressure to allow the talented quarterbacks that you have to create interceptions, safeties, right? Like that's the dynamic in play. It's just a matter of him, Nittany, those guys actually doing it.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Nittany Sutton. As you mentioned there, he has superstar qualities, sometimes supersede superstar abilities in terms of Nittany is very good at playing defensive end. He's also no slouch at rushing the passer. Last year, he filled in for Chop Robinson and had some pretty dominant wins in the Big Ten. Is he the elite burst athlete that has the complete game that can be an all-around pass rusher, speed, power, movement, everything? He is not. But he's 90% of it. And just because Abdul Carter is this potential game wrecker superstar that can get there first, I feel like we don't talk enough about how good Nittany Sutton was and his potential leap to being another superstar on that side of the ball. I think that's a potential. But the guy I'm going to highlight because of the scheme and because of his talent is Tony Rojas. I think Tony Rojas in this defense, now the will linebacker in any defense generally is a playmaker, but just in Tom Allen's defense, some of the responsibilities against the pass that they're asked to execute, they're blitzing, run defense, involved in everything. And, when they had to make decisions at Indiana about who's going to be the playmaker, who's going to be the best athlete, who are we going to put in position to be the star of the defense, it was the will linebacker. I don't know how he's going to adapt to having defensive talent like he has now, where you have an Abdul Carter, the defensive tackles we talked about, and the safeties. But Tony Rojas, to me, has superstar qualities as a linebacker to be a complete player. And as good as the Penn State linebackers have been, they have not had a complete player who is a dominant force in the passing game as well. And I think Rojas has the opportunity at some point in his career to be that guy. Does it happen in the beginning of the season? Does it happen by the end of the season? I don't know. And it's also criminal, Nate, that we haven't mentioned a single safety because the defense is really friendly to safeties. So there could be a guy that has 6 interceptions.
Yeah. And that is Wheatley's deal, right? Like he has a reputation for that. Winston caught his first interception late in the season last year. Wheatley is that sneaky part of the defense where, I think he's been an off-season point of conversation, but I think it's really hard for me because I think that the way that we look at football games, you see splash plays as being happenstance almost, right? That they're one-offs, but they're not. Like they're not. They are meticulously planned for. If you put yourself in position to do these things all the time. You're not always going to make the play, to do the spectacular, but it's there's a purpose to it, right? There is a reason that some of these guys make those plays, and I do think that there is an opportunity, really all over the field for Penn State's defense to have again game changing plays.
Yeah.
Those splash plays are so important. It is the inverse of the explosive play conversation on offense.
Yeah. Zach brings this up here in the chat, and it's something that you and I are, I think, the opposite of, but I want to then explain why that is. Zach says, I'm most concerned about the cornerback room, and he says, I feel like this is obvious. They've been practicing against Penn State's wide receivers, so do we really know how good they are until they face someone who can push the ball down the field? There's a fair point there. I think it's a little overstated that the receivers at Penn State are terrible. It feels like that's kind of like bordering on blatant disrespect for the receiver room. I don't think they're that bad.
No.
But the reporting and everything we've been talking about is be very excited about this cornerback room, and Zach's feeling the opposite way. So do you think he's valid? Do you think it's fair that he feels that way?
Do I think it's fair? I think that last year's the Peach Bowl specifically exposed potential issues with the players that will be playing this year, or some of the players that will be playing this year, right? Some of the challenges that they had in that game against a team that could pass the ball, right? I don't know that last year's schedule gets the attention that it should for just how dismally bad the passing operation in specific was for most of the teams on Penn State's schedule. There were no team, like, who passed the ball well other than, and I'm not saying that was not influenced by Penn State. It was, but Iowa couldn't throw the ball. Ohio State really couldn't, right? I mean, through the season, were they awesome?
So no, they were not awesome to the level that they have been in the past, but they were not. Their quarterback struggled, but they still had a dynamic passing attack because they had the receivers that were dynamic. Talia Tungavaloa threw 25 touchdowns and 3,000 yards, almost 3,500 yards. But yeah, he was terrible in that game because Penn State was so good. To me, the absolute difference was in the first half of that game, you had Abdul Carter denying Dennis Sutton and Adisa Isaac wrecking things.
Yep.
And then Curtis Jacobs sits the second half. Adisa sits the second half. Abdul gets hurt. And suddenly you have young corners without your starters and no pass rush to help them. Because as much as Denai was still getting wins in that game, he was not able to get home because you didn't have the overwhelming barrage of pressure. You didn't have the things that made Manny Diaz. And by the way, you didn't have Manny Diaz to make adjustments in the game in his scheme that he understands better than Anthony Poindexter, who's trying to run that.
Yep.
For the first time. So there was a lot of defensive stuff that I think the corners were hung out to dry, and Cam Miller ended up fighting back literally and physically to have a better end of the game. But nobody cares about that because you latch on to the emotion of the bad stuff, and they lost the game. So I think it's fair to have those emotions, but there was a lot that went into that particular game that I think we don't even talk about when we talk about some of those issues last year. And then I would agree. Outside of maybe Tagovailoa, I was told going into the game that the quarterback at Illinois was good, and from a talent perspective, he was good, but the offense couldn't operate. Yep. So there were things that Penn State had that were total cheat codes, like, hey, you can't block anybody. We're unblockable. So good luck finding a passing attack that works.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. But look, the for the most part, the schedule is much of the same in terms of what's anticipated this year. I mean, Southern Cal is going to pass the ball. You would anticipate that they'll be better.
No, you're right. It undoubtedly better this year. Undoubtedly.
So to that end, is there look, there's validity for fans to be concerned about everything. I tend to hedge that way over the overly optimistic side of things, but I do think that these are for the most part, all of the things that we've talked about this offseason as being poised for very good / great seasons
Yeah.
are all in line. I would like any of those storylines falling off dramatically. I would be very, very surprised by.
Next question here from the Blue White Illustrated message board. Once again, you subscribe, you go to the Blue White Illustrated message board on Monday night. If I have not forgotten already, you submit your question, or you can do it Tuesday morning before the show. Doug21988 says, we've heard all off season how Andy Nittany is going to bring a renewed focus on running the ball this year, but we, meaning Penn State, led the Big Ten in rushing pretty decently and decidedly last year. So what does success in his offense look like? Is it just as simple as scoring more points in big games? Nate, give your answer, and I will follow up with my long and winding diatribe afterwards.
Is it as simple as saying scoring more points in big games? Yes. And the caveat to that is, right, the complicated answer is more explosiveness in the passing game, allowing more explosiveness in the running game, and an ability to do both in a way that Penn State did not have last season, right?
Yeah.
There was a blueprint on how to stop Penn State's offense by the second week of the season. And
Yep.
that it never changed. It
I'd
really
say
did
Delaware actually gave a good blueprint of how to stop Penn State in a lot of ways.
right. So there was, if you could keep the running backs in check, and they did for the most part, right? Even running the ball the way that they did and having some of the statistical success that they did, it was untenable when Penn State needed to pass the ball to move the football, and
Yeah.
and you saw that it was most glaring in the Michigan and Ohio State game, right? Conditions were probably part of that conversation against Michigan. Michigan choosing to run the ball 31 times in a row, right, was indicative of that. But yes, if everything from last year carries over, if they're exactly the same, but better in their explosiveness, I do think that it changes the efficiency numbers across the board. And again, if you dig in, and I don't know how much you do this, T. Frank, but if you dig into the efficiency numbers and some of the analytics of Penn State's offense last year, it wasn't in the 80s. Like,
did
it wasn't.
I dig into the efficiency?
Of course
numbers?
you did. Of
course
I
did. Yeah.
But it wasn't as dramatically bad as it was made out to be. It was just, okay, if you finish 25th in offensive efficiency, that's not going to get them where they want to go. That's not the conversation that surrounds Penn State football right now.
You took all the words that were the right ones to say, so I'll just nutshell it quickly with what Rob said. Last year, 27 drives, touchdown drives of 8 plays or more, 16 that took double-digit plays. Both those numbers, he says, I'm guessing, led the nation, or at least were in the top 5, if not the top 2. Less is more. If you look at some of those efficiency numbers, Kansas had about, I want to say, 200 fewer plays, it might have been, because of those numbers. They were in the 800s or 900s, and Penn State was just around 1,000 plays last year. And yet they had more explosive run plays. They had more explosive passing plays. Efficiency is the name of the game. More explosiveness leads to more points, but it is the way you're scoring those points that is absolutely the matter. And that leads me to this conversation, Nate. PSU party! He says, if Penn State wins the coin toss, do they take the ball and start on defense? Your thoughts?
I think they start on defense.
I disagree, but tell me why.
Okay. I think they start on defense because they're at West Virginia and have an opportunity to provide better field position than maybe otherwise. If you start with the ball at the 25, receiving the ball versus forcing a punt and starting with it at the 40. I think that is a decided advantage for the road team. I think having the ball just open the second half is something that they like to do. So yeah, I think that they will start on defense, but I am excited to hear your rationale for starting with the ball.
This is going to be a season-long trend for me until I see that they can handle the opposite. This offense needs to play with a lead. They cannot get behind in any game.
That's
From schematically to personality-wise, until Drew Aller proves that he can ascend to a player that in clutch time or when the pressure, literally, or game pressure or pressure of the moment is on him, until he proves that he can rise to that moment, then I don't know if I ever want to see him with the ball down 7 points. And I think that is just until I see otherwise, that's going to be how I feel. And here's the part of this that I think folding this particular matchup in is potentially dangerous. Now, I expect Penn State's defense to be very good. But if we're talking about the opposite of Drew Aller, you have Garrett Green, who was one of the most explosive quarterbacks in the country last year. And one of the reasons everyone's very high on him, and James Franklin was high on him both before and after the game last year in Happy Valley. I'll give you one stat that I saw the other day when I was looking up some things about Drew Aller. Garrett Green, big time throw percentage, is a throw in the PFF system that is a field flipping, game defining throw, like one of the best you can throw. It's in their grading system. It's above a certain threshold. 10% of his throws last year were big time throws. That's the number one quarterback in the nation among quarterbacks that were like starting level or received a certain number of snaps. So that's better than Jaden Daniels. That's better than Drake May, Michael Penix Jr., Sam Hartman, Tyler Van Dyke, who was a good quarterback in football last year. The most explosive player from a passing perspective, meaning it was on him that the throw was great. I don't think I would put that offense out there and allow my offense to get behind. But also, just my opinion here is also just a tone setter for the season. That's why I wanted to put that out there. But specifically in that matchup, I think Penn State can handle that, and they can keep a lid on Garrett Green. But that is the threat that's out there. We don't have enough time to get into this the way I wanted to because, of course, we talk. Nate and I love talking. We love these discussions. And we already covered this a little bit, but specifically, what is the significance of Drew Aller being named captain for himself and the team? Thank you to the BWI staff for all that you do. Thank you, Brady Smith, for contributing the question. I did not get your name up there correctly, but I wanted to make sure that this great question got to the right person. So appreciate you, Brady. Nate, you are the czar of these particular conversations. Lead us off into the correct path of conversation about Drew Aller being named captain.
Yeah, I think it is a jumping off point for him to take another step in his career and his trajectory, right? Good vibes, I think, are very important to that position anyway. I think the pressure, I think all the stuff that goes into being the starting quarterback coming off of a season that had a lot of good and some disappointment. It's a great way for him to begin the year, to have that designation, to know that you command a certain level of respect and leadership within the football program. It's highly significant.
Yeah, and I'm not going to out myself, but sometimes when you control the vote, you can put your thumb on the scale a little bit. I know that James Franklin talked about it's not just the players that vote, it's the staff as a whole, not just the coaches, but the staff that interact with the Penn State players. Ryan asks a potential conspiracy theory question here, but it is not out of the realm of possibility. He says, was the decision, do you think, just your opinion here, is there potential that the decision was forced and we're optimistically putting him in the position of a captain to then become a captain?
I don't have any insight into it. I don't think so.
Yeah, honestly. And I don't want to put you in that position of like Nate Bauer, journalistically integral reporter, is reporting that is not what's happening.
Yeah, no, I would not. I would not say that. That is not how I would describe where they got to as a team with that vote.
Last thing here in the BWI mailbag, David Worth says, going to the Kent State game, first time since 2019. Welcome back to the party. Do you guys have a booth somewhere around the stadium? Actually, David, you gave me the perfect opportunity for some more shameless promotion to end the show. We will be doing the Penn State Football Tailgate Show 90 minutes before kickoff, every home game, right outside the Bryce Jordan ticket office. It is in conjunction with 99.5 The Bus. So if you can't come over and say hi, you should check out the show 99.5 The Bus 90 minutes before kickoff, leading into the official tailgate show, pregame show of the Penn State Football Radio Network. You can come say hi to myself and Landon Tangwall, who is going to be joining me for the entirety of the season to give our analysis and preview of the game. And Nate, you know, because it's me and an offensive lineman, it's going to be the nerdiest stuff you could talk about. It's going to be all the detail, all the X's and O's. We're going to give you what we think is going to happen and why. And all of the, he's a former player, so he knows all of those other things as well. Leadership, chemistry, all that stuff. We're going to provide you a comprehensive tailgate show. So check it out. 90 minutes before kickoff here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, live in person or 99.5 The Bus. Nate, what do we need to get from you as we get out of here?
I just props for Landon. I think he's great. I've been on his show. I know we've had him on ours, and I'm very much looking forward to his insights with you for the preview show. Outside of that, more stuff this week. Full week of coverage, and we'll get this thing into game week.
Awesome, and I'm excited for that. Of course. Follow along at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for our full game week coverage. We've got a full game week coverage coming up next week. James Franklin's press conference at noon on Monday. You can get the live replay here on the YouTube channel. It is the only way to start your game week, hearing whatever you think is coming out of James Franklin's mouth, whether it is explanations, excuses, victory, whatever. You're going to get all of the comments here, and leave your comments on those videos so we can hear what you have to say about Penn State football. That's coming up next week. We got to get going. We'll be back tomorrow with our recap of practice and more with Greg Pickle on the BWI Live show. I can't stop promoting, Nate, so I'm just going to turn my mic off. See ya.